exclusive report in the Wall Street Journal today indicates that Israel is in fact planning to strike Iran's nuclear sites, which would be catastrophic for the Middle East and potentially for the United States. Now, this would, of course, lead to a massive escalation of war in the Middle East. And here's what we know about this so far. So, US intelligence basically had already concluded in the final days of the Biden administration that Israel was planning to strike Iran's nuclear sites. Now, they perceive Iran as significantly weakened as a result of the ongoing war on Gaza, the war that also spread to Lebanon briefly. And so, because of the weakness of Hezbollah, because of Bashar al-Assad, essentially being ousted from power in Syria, all of these allies to Iran have been weakened. All of these proxy groups, they've been weakened. So the idea that Israel has right now is, if we're gonna strike, now is the time to do it. But they might be underestimating the military capabilities that Iran has, because they might be mistaking, Iran's unwillingness to really fully retaliate against Israel for everything that's happened in this war as weakness. But we don't really know whether or not Iran is really weakened to the point where Israel could just easily strike their nuclear sites and face no blowback whatsoever, or little blowback from Iran. So we're gonna get to the details on that in just a minute. But the intelligence analysis concluded Israel would push the Trump administration to back the strikes, viewing him as more likely to join an attack than now former President Joe Biden. Now, Joe Biden was terrible on the issue of Israel. We didn't give him much credit because he didn't deserve much credit. One area where he appeared to pump the brakes, at least a little bit, was this notion that Israel should do strikes in Iran, specifically when it comes to their nuclear sites. Donald Trump, though, in the lead up to the presidential election, made it clear that he felt totally comfortable with Israel striking the nuclear sites within Iran, but he has kind of changed his tone a little bit. Now, back in November, Israeli Defense Minister Israel Katz argued that Iran is more exposed than ever to take strikes on its nuclear facilities. We have the opportunity to achieve our most important goal, to thwart and eliminate the existential threat to the state of Israel. So US intelligence then went on to produce a subsequent report in the early days of Trump's second term. I know we're still in the early days, but in the very start of Trump's term, they had produced a second intelligence report in regard to the possibility of Israel carrying out these strikes. And so what they found, US military support and munitions would likely be needed for an Israeli attack on Iran's heavily fortified nuclear sites, given their complexity, US military officials say. So let's pause there for a second. If Israel carries this out, understand this wouldn't simply be a war between Israel and Iran. This would be a war that would require Americans there in the region, boots on the ground. They would need American military support. Okay, this is based on what US military officials are saying. And of course, it would require weapons that we, American taxpayers, would be paying for, which would really put a damper on Donald Trump's goals of cutting spending. Because that's what we keep hearing about, right? They want to cut spending in order to justify the tax cuts that he wants to extend and the additional tax cuts he wants to add, which would lower the corporate tax rate from 21% to 15%. Republicans claim they're worried about the national debt. It costs over $1 trillion a year to service our national debt. So I too am actually a little bit concerned about where we stand with national debt. So this idea that we should continue aiding and abetting whatever Israel wants to do in the Middle East with our military and our taxpayer dollars is ludicrous. And really at this point, I mean, Israel is saying, oh, we've totally weakened Iran. We've totally weakened Iran. Hezbollah, we've wiped out their leaders. Hamas, we've wiped out their leaders. Even some of Iran's military capabilities, Israel claims, they've managed to weaken. Okay, excellent. So why escalate this into a hot war with Iran by targeting and striking their nuclear sites? And I want to note, by the way, that Iran had stopped enriching uranium, which could be used for a nuclear weapon, when they were part of the Iran nuclear deal, the deal that President Barack Obama had negotiated. There were checks to ensure that Iran was following through with their part of the deal. And then Donald Trump came in because his daddy, Benjamin Netanyahu, said he didn't like that deal, just ripped it up. And look, Donald Trump loves the idea of reversing anything a Democratic president accomplished or did, whether it be an executive order or in the case of the Iran nuclear deal, it was a deal that former President Barack Obama had negotiated with some of our Western allies. It wasn't just between the United States and Iran. There were European countries involved, and they were also involved in the oversight to ensure that Iran was not developing nuclear weapons. When Trump ripped that up, that allowed for Iran to begin enriching uranium again. Now they claim up and down, they always swear that they are not developing a nuclear weapon. But US intelligence isn't buying it. I think US intelligence has gotten things wrong in the past as well. So I wouldn't just take what US intelligence says at face value. But I don't doubt that Israel is considering striking Iran's nuclear sites because they've been talking about this incessantly. It's not like they've been trying to hide it. The only thing really standing in their way, in their minds, was the possibility of the US president not being on board. But they believe that Donald Trump would be on board for this. And as I said earlier, there was some indication that Trump would give them the green light to do it, but now he's changing his tune a little bit. So let's talk about that. So during the presidential transition, some members of Trump's team considered the viability of Israel launching preventative strikes. That sounds like preemptive war to me, just like what we did in Iraq. Preventative strikes on Iranian nuclear sites, including having US forces join Israeli aircraft in a bombing campaign. But now Trump has allegedly changed his tune, and he claims that he would actually like to negotiate a new nuclear deal with Iran. And by the way, if he's being honest about that, it should be encouraged. Okay, if he wants the cookies, if he wants us to validate him and tell him that his Iran nuclear deal is bigger and better than Obama's, great. Anything to prevent a hot war with Iran. So he had actually posted this on Truth Social over the last week. He said that reports that the United States, working in conjunction with Israel, is going to blow Iran into smithereens are greatly exaggerated. And I hope that's true. I hope that is greatly exaggerated because we heard from Donald Trump's own mouth that he was totally comfortable with Israel carrying out these strikes. But now he wants to make a deal. So Iran, luckily, would also like to negotiate a new nuclear deal. So its foreign minister was quoted as saying the following on Iran state media. If the main obstacle for the US is Iran pursuing nuclear weapons, then that can be resolved. Iran's stance on nuclear weapons is clear. Now, while Iran has amassed a large stockpile of enriched uranium, which could theoretically be used to build a nuclear bomb, they swear they're not developing the weapons. US intelligence last December, though, concluded that the risk of them doing so is heightened, that they've developed so much of this enriched uranium that if they wanted to carry out the development of a nuclear weapon, they would have the ability to do so. So that has made US intelligence incredibly uneasy. And look, understand what a nuclear weapon does. Obviously, nuclear weapons, incredibly dangerous. The idea of countries who are considered nuclear countries disarming themselves from these nuclear weapons would be better, but that's not gonna happen. So when you look at what has transpired with this war against Ukraine, with Russia's invasion into Ukraine, a lot of the decisions that get made in regard to US foreign policy have to do with the fact that we're dealing with a nuclear power. So Israel's a nuclear power. No one complains about that ever, but understand that being a nuclear power also serves as a deterrent. Other countries are less likely to attack you knowing that you are a nuclear power. So Iran having a nuclear weapon could potentially serve as a deterrent to Israel's power in that region. I think that's what Israel is most concerned about, because it is true that right now, Iran is not posing much of a threat to Israel. Israel has wiped out all the leaders in the Iranian proxy groups, Hezbollah and Hamas. And in regard to Iran's retaliation against Israel for doing strikes on Iranian territory already, I mean, you can just see that they are holding back. They are resisting the urge to engage in a full-blown war. Why are they doing that? I don't think it's from the kindness of their own hearts. I think they understand that Israel is aligned with the United States, which is the greatest military power in the world. So our relationship with Israel is a deterrent when it comes to aggression from Iran. And really, there is no deterrent when it comes to provocative moves or the possibility of engaging in a hot war that starts with Israel carrying out strikes. So look, we don't know what's gonna happen here. This, Wall Street Journal exclusive really has me concerned, because what I have noticed with Donald Trump is, while he might to some extent have this instinct to negotiate, to enter peace agreements, seems like he's making some headway with Russia, for instance. He's also very easily swayed by money and by the likes of Benjamin Netanyahu. I mean, earlier this week, Donald Trump talked about torpedoing the ceasefire deal because some of the Israeli hostages who were returned by Hamas looked emaciated. And his argument was, oh my God, they look terrible. This is terrible. I can't believe they look like they've been starved. Yeah, buddy, they've been starved, just like all the Palestinians who didn't have access to humanitarian aid because the Israelis were blocking the humanitarian aid from entering the Gaza Strip. Do you think it's only going to impact the Palestinians, or could it be that kind of blockade is going to have a negative impact on the Israeli hostages being held captive in Gaza as well? And of course, Donald Trump was paid handsomely by the likes of Miriam Adelson to do the bidding of Israel's government and whatever they want. And so I don't feel at all comfortable that Trump is going to do the right thing in preventing a hot war with Iran. So brace for impact. We'll see how this story develops, but right now it is not looking good. There is that tiny silver lining of Trump saying that he wants to do a new nuclear deal. I hope he does. But make no mistake, Israel's not interested in a nuclear deal. Israel, and Netanyahu in particular, is the main reason why Trump pulled out of the Iran nuclear deal to begin with. So we're gonna see what kind of leadership we can expect from Donald Trump when it comes to a very specific type of foreign policy pertaining to Israel and what the Israeli government wants.
If you enjoyed this video, that's because of our members. They make us independent, they make us strong, and they make us honest. Become a member today by hitting the join button below.